Part 2 of the $25 modular table. In this one we're going to look at construction. And I'd just like to remind everybody that the $25, your mileage might vary. There's no guarantees there. I use about $25 worth of materials, but if you had to buy everything, even the stuff that you don't fully use up, it might cost you around $50. Obviously you could spend a lot more if you wanted, but $25 is what it cost me. So starting out, I've got some white primer. You can see there a primer, and there's my brush. So what I'm going to do, there's my panels. I got 6 panels there from Home Depot, handy panels, 2 foot by 2 foot, and I'm going to start priming them. So why in the world did I prime them like this? I'm not totally positive this is necessary. This is something I learned in high school art class. We were doing paintings on stuff, and when we primed it, we put an X on the back side. So this is the back. That's why you see the UPC code. And then we paint that first, and then you paint the other side, and this is supposed to prevent it from warping. And because these are just 1/4 inch panels that aren't reinforced, I did not want to risk warping them. So tried that. Don't know if that would behave differently if I hadn't done it. Anyways, that didn't take long to do anyways. Okay, now I'm just painting the front side with my primer. And it doesn't have to be a perfect coat, and you also want to make sure you don't get any paint blobs on the edges there, because that'll prevent it from sitting nice and close together. But just trying to cover everything up to seal the surface and give something for the paint to stick to. So there we are, all done. And I'm just keeping things up off the floor. This is my garage, because I don't want any paint to get on there or any dirt to get on this. So just putting on top of some recycling bins. Okay, now here's the edge of my ceiling tiles. As you can see, they already have a nice texture on them, and they're just a bit of an off-white color. That's actually perfect for what I want to do. But they are slightly less than 2 feet square, and they have this little edge here. And what the idea is that when you install these, you have a hanger that goes in here, and the 2 panels go side by side, and this kind of gets hidden. So I want to get rid of that. So using my X-Acto knife, I carefully cut along there, tried to get it as straight as possible. It looks like I'm holding it weird because it's my left hand and I'm trying to take a picture. So normally I wouldn't hold it like that, but always cut away from your hands and try to do it slow. Do multiple cuts. That way you get a nice smooth edge, even though you're going to be breaking it later. You might want to use these for more hills later, because I ended up with lots left over. So there you can see all the edges I cut off, all 4 panels, and it's pretty straight. Now what I'm doing is I'm tracing out the line where I want to cut. So I'm just planning everything out, and I laid my tiles out on my board and just planning it out. Here I am with my jigsaw, and I'm just going to go zip right through there. I'm not too concerned about how accurate it is. I just want to have a kind of a semi-irregular shape, so that way it doesn't look like it's too phony. So there we are, done. Jigsaw cuts through that really fast. You could do that with any sort of a handsaw or even a knife. The reason I didn't want to break it is because I'm going to save this side. I only had 4 panels. I should have maybe had more, but I'm using this side, and then I'm going to cut this side this way and use it for another hill. So I'm using both sides here. The only waste is this part here. But if I was to do that with an X-Acto knife, I would just kind of trace it out slowly and just gradually cut deeper and deeper. So I've cut this one here, and what I did now is I just traced this here so it matches up. So I put them up, made sure that end there was flush, put them as close together, and traced out where I want it to meet up, and cut right through that with a jigsaw. Okay, so here's how it's kind of going to look when the first layer of hill is laid down. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that these ones here match up with the other 2 panels that are going to go on this side. And also when I get down there, I want to make sure that that end of the hill matches right over here. And there I am lining it up again. There you can see this one, that's the other side of the panel that I used already, and this is the waste part here. Just applying some glue. Just want to cover most of it. No particular pattern, just want to make sure it all sticks down and none of it lifts. So you also want to make sure you get pretty close to the edge, so that way you don't have any problems later. And there we are, all glued together. I just stacked everything up to get a bit of weight on it, and I left this overnight for the glue to dry. If any glue did squirt out here, you want to wipe it off with your finger and because that might be a little bit of a trouble getting off later, and you don't want to have to gouge things with knives. Okay, so now what I'm doing here is I'm just sanding this out. There's my sanding block, and these edges here I decided I want them to be kind of smooth, and I'm going to have some cliff faces on other parts, but this particular one is going to be all smooth. Okay, so now here I am sanding this off. You can see it, nothing to it. Sorry about the shaky camera. I'm trying to do two things at once, obviously. You can see that going around the edge there, and it sands quite easily. And so I just want to make sure that it's all smooth. And here's what it looks like when I'm all done sanding. So trying to get this as smooth of an edge, just so that the models actually will stand on there. And as well, I don't want any of these gaps there because that won't look great later on. So just trying to work it through as best I can. And as well, I want to line these up and make sure everything, these edges here, are working together. And there we are, the first layer all done. So these are glued down, and I left them to dry, and then I sanded everything once it was all dry. If I tried to sand it when it was wet, it would have moved around. This one here, I've kept that kind of sharp because I'm going to make that a rock face. I think it's that one and that one as well. And now I'm just going to lay out the other tiles. So because I only have 2 more tiles left, I'm going to make sure that they all fit on here right. So I'm actually just going to use this one tile, and I'm going to cut it later. But I'm going to break all the edges off first. So here I am breaking off the edges of the tile. It's actually very simple. I'm going to show you in a video, but with one hand it's not as easy. But basically you want to just break off the edge, not like that piece there because it went a nice big long straight and that doesn't look that realistic. So you want to just do it in little pieces like that, and each one of them just pops right off and you end up with a nice rough edge. Here, a little bit more. And there you are. And I'm saving all those pieces because I might use those for rocks later on. And that's what the edges look like once you've broken them. So lots of nice irregular shapes. It's paper, basically compressed paper. So you're going to need to seal that. Make sure you paint it up well. One of the drawbacks of using this is that if you were to bump this, you would bump it off, take a chunk off and end up with a little white showing through. This isn't totally necessary, but what it does is it helps give you a bit more of a grain on the edge there. So you can see that it's pulling in through a couple of areas, and I'm going to use this on the lower level of. So I used that wire brush along some of these edges here, and I'm also going to use it on these ones down here because I didn't actually break those. That was a bit of a mistake. I should have done that. So that was a way of fixing it later. So there's the top half of the hill kind of laid out. So I wanted a nice big cliff face here, so I kind of lined up those edges. I'm going to make this smooth ramp all the way up here. I think I do one as well over here, and then the rest of it's going to be kind of cliff faces. So once these are glued together, I'm just using the sander or the sanding block just to try to smooth everything out. There we are. There, basically done with the top part. So the idea is I have a ramp going all the way up here as well over there, and then some cliff faces around the other areas. So what I've done here, you can't quite see it that well, but I've marked off kind of where I want this to lay out, and I'm just going to cut across here and across here with an X-Acto knife. So there's the pencil mark, just lightly done, and then with a with a ruler and a good X-Acto knife, just going through here and cutting it slowly, multiple passes, making sure that the knife is up and down straight, and I'm not cutting towards myself. And just being patient. If you force things, then you might end up ripping through it and ending up with a mistake that you can't fix. So then I cut across the other way. I used a carpenter's square to make sure that this was perfectly 90 degrees. You could also use one of your panels just to make sure that. The last thing you want is this angle to be off. So that's the end of part 2, the modular table construction. You saw how I put the hills together. And in the last part, I'm going to show you how to color and flock it all.